All right, hi everybody. I'm Matt Stephenson. I'm a behavioral economist, and I work at BlockScience and Planck. And with me is Kevin Owocki. He's the founder of Gitcoin. It needs no introduction, but you kind of have to do it anyway, you know? It's part of the job. And then Abby will be joining us. Wait, is she up? There's Abby. Okay, amazing. Abby is a space cadet at Radicle, according to her Twitter. She's a community lead. And so they're both OGs in open source and public goods funding, and so we're excited to sort of like talk about that. So we're gonna lead with a hardball just to sort of show that we mean business here. So are public goods good, Kevin?
Wow, Matt, what a great question. Yes, public goods are good, Matt.
Okay, let's turn it over to Abby for this one. Abby, are public goods good?
I think they're great, don't you think?
Ooh,
Okay,
I got one
absolutely.
All right.
All right, great, fantastic. So I guess what is a public good? Like, what's the cleanest, easiest way to describe it? Would you say?
Yeah, so the economist's definition of a public good is something that's non-excludable and non-rivalrous, which basically means as opposed to something that you can get on Amazon, like a DVD player, where if you consume it, someone else cannot consume it, and there's a barrier to consuming it. Something like clean air, which we're all consuming right now, and my consumption of it doesn't block you from consuming it, Matt, means that it's a public good. It's something that we all get just by being on this earth. And one of the things that we've realized is that a lot of the value that we derive in the world is from things like clean air or transportation networks or open source software or journalism, these things that you can consume without blocking someone else from consuming them create a lot of value in the world. And one of the problems with public goods is that they don't really have a business model because they're non-excludable. And so how do we make sure that things that are public goods in our digital age, like say open source software, are well funded and the people who are supporting them don't get burnt out and taken advantage of because their work is freely available online for free?
Perfect, yeah. And so open source would be like a subset then of a great example of a public good, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Abby, obviously you're working with this incredible collaboration tool in open source software. Do you think about it in a public goods context? Like open source, do you think explicit? Okay. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
when it comes to open source software, sorry to cut in, I think it's actually super cool that the term commons based peer production, which describes a means of production in which people work cooperatively, usually over the internet, to achieve a collective outcome, was literally coined to explain the phenomenon of open source. So I think that open source software specifically is this really interesting design space that mixes, production, online production often, and software development with incentive design. And so it's really cool to be kind of thinking about open source software in that perspective.
Well, so say more about the incentive design piece. I know that Radicle is launching Radicle Funding. If you're allowed to talk about that a little bit, can you say a few words?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping that's what we would talk about today.
Say a lot of words then.
But yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar with Radicle, I wish I could see you guys, but I can't see you, so apologies. But so Radicle is basically a decentralized network for code collaboration. It allows people to collaborate on Git repositories completely peer-to-peer. And the cool new part about it is that it's actually integrated with Ethereum. So it allows you to kind of maintain this sovereign developer identity that's not only based in peer-to-peer artifacts, but also in this global Ethereum identity that we're all growing in this Web3 space. And so while we're able to harness Ethereum for global names, decentralized organizations, giving people the ability to manage code bases on chain, we're also able to tap into the power of DeFi. So, at Radicle, we think that DeFi is so great. It's so awesome that we have all of these tooling for decentralized finance, but there's kind of something on the horizon, and we think it's DevFi. So DevFi being using these powerful financial primitives to harnessing their power to use it to empower maintainers and developers. So we believe that DevFi is decentralized finance that supports the sustainable and regenerative funding of open source software. And so with Radicle Funding, what we're trying to do is take these financial primitives, spin them and craft them and put them in front of developers to give maintainers and open source contributors and developers the ability to create their own value flows and build better solutions for empowering themselves to control the means of their production and distribution of open source software. So we can like dive into what that means, but with Radicle Funding, it's about taking the DeFi tools and putting it in front of the developer and giving them the means to kind of interact and create their own experiences on top of them.
That's great. Thank you. Well, so Radicle is this great tool for like collaboration and coordination. Obviously, Kevin, well known for telling us that it's all coordination.
It is. It's all coordination, and it always has been.
And it always has been. Exactly right. So one of the weird things is in economics, we always think that like there's a trade-off between coordination and flexibility. And the example that's always given for coordination is like the army, because they're marching in the same, like they're taking one step at the exact same time and so on, right? But obviously the culture around coordination in Web3 is a lot different than the army. And how have you managed to sort of like achieve a level of coordination and collaboration, specialization, while maintaining like a good, flexible, open kind of culture, right? That doesn't feel so rigid and lockstep, like you can be the failure mode in the real world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, my mind goes to, this seems like a mechanism design question for me, and I think that some of the best mechanisms are not fragile or even anti-fragile. Gitcoin is known for implementing this thing called Quadratic Funding, which is an idea from Glenn Weil and Vitalik Buterin, where basically every quarter we run a matching campaign of, it's called Gitcoin Grants, and we've got one going right now. It's $950,000. And basically the idea is that we distribute it contemporaneously with a crowdfunding campaign that, and the gimmick with Quadratic Funding is that if Grant 1 raises $10 from one contributor and Grant 2 raises $10 from 10 contributors, then Grant 2 gets way more of the matching funds, because Quadratic Funding optimizes for the preferences of the poor and the many as opposed to the rich and the few. And so you can kind of take advantage of the build a mechanism that is resistant to being fragile and rigid, and you can take advantage of the distributed nature of the coordination in the space to actually get signal from the noise. And I think that the best mechanisms are the ones that are going to optimize for that. So maybe in the old world, pre-internet, pre-blockchain coordination, there's that trade-off and with rigidity and coordination, but I do think that we are coordinating at web scale, and we've got a global substrate in Ethereum, a transparent, global, immutable, programmable place for coordination to happen. And because it's immutable, it's incorruptible. And that, to me, feels like a really great place to solve our contemporary problems with climate change and misinformation and underfunding of digital infrastructure. I think that blockchain-based networks are a really great place to start solving these coordination problems.
Great, yeah. So actually, if you could say a little more about, so Quadratic Funding, the round is about to close. How soon?
It closes in a couple days. I think we have about 48 hours left, and hopefully it'll be our biggest round yet.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. But there's also a recent project that Gitcoin launched around Moonbots, right? Mm-hmm. And Moonbots is this really cool NFT project where maybe you could say more about it.
Yeah, totally. So Quadratic Funding works really well if you've got a set of matching funds that you can deploy contemporaneously with the crowdfunding campaign. And one of the things that is really exciting about the blockchain space is using market-based mechanisms in order to fund public goods, as opposed to a coercive mechanism for funding public goods. Like in the old world, taxation is a pretty common way of funding our infrastructure. And so Gitcoin Grants is on round 11 right now. Rounds 1 through 6 were funded by the Ethereum Foundation. Rounds 7 through 10, we started to see DeFi projects that wanted to give back to the infrastructure that is the foundation of their projects funded the matching pools. And so, if you think about it, your bags, the DeFi projects that you hold bags in, are all supported by this infrastructure of open source software underneath of them. And they've got a rational economic reason that they want to make sure that that infrastructure is well funded. You prevent black swan events from occurring in those things that could undermine the foundation upon which your bags rest. And so rounds 7 through 10, we saw DeFi projects that were funding the matching pool. And then in round 11, the NFT space was heating up, and Gitcoin DAO basically got in on the action by launching this thing called Moonshot Bots, which is basically a little Gitcoin bot, a pixelated robot that you could buy as an NFT, and each purchase increased the price of Moonshot Bots by 5%. And so the first Moonshot Bot was minted for about $10, and the most recent Moonshot Bot was minted for 110K. And we've raised all in all $2.2 million for public goods just by leveraging the trends in the blockchain space. Thank you. So yeah, I'm proud that we're leveraging blockchain-based ecosystems to find non-coercive ways of funding public goods, and I hope that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, cool. And they're really cool looking too, by the way. If you haven't seen them, if you go to Kevin's Twitter, your av is a Moonshot Bot, right?
Yeah, it looks rare.
It just looks super rare, yeah. Is it the first one, by the way?
It's not, but it is. We minted maybe like 10 of them as soon as we announced them, just to have them to give out to members of the Funders League, people who have funded public goods. And the one that's my Twitter avatar is one of the ones we minted, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you can't have a PFP on your Twitter avatar that you don't actually own. I think that's the ultimate NFT faux pas.
Absolutely, totally disallowed. Yeah, excellent. So Abby, Radicle differs a little bit from, as I understand it, the Git structure that we're used to, in the sense that there's no canonical kind of initial code commit that everybody draws from. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that Radicle supports a more bazaar style approach to development than the cathedral type of development, based in the fact of its peer-to-peer nature, and that users on Radicle are maintaining and publishing and replicating their own versions of projects that then are communicating differences in with each other. And so it's more of that kind of bazaar style development than the cathedral.
Yeah. That's radical, Abby.
Thanks. I think it's based in the fact that Radicle is not based off of accounts or email addresses. It's based off of keys. And so identities on Radicle are, really local first. And so you're kind of communicating change sets from there, instead of going to this main platform and then kind of creating the identity in the platform. The identity remains sovereign to you. And then you're able to link that to the global substrate of collaboration, which is Ethereum.
Very cool. And that's available. You can actually build software and use and collaborate on Radicle right now.
Yeah, Radicle is live. We launched it back in December. And we've been just rolling out more and more features as we go. So our most feature launch was Radicle Orgs, which was the first feature of our Ethereum integration, which allows for developers to manage their code bases on chain. So this is everything from managing access control with smart contracts, anchoring project state on chain to achieve a more trustless canonical state that can be collectively agreed upon in a decentralized manner. And then also building in the value flows that come with, open source development by linking code bases to multi-sigs that then are related to protocol treasuries, project funds. And so that's kind of where we see Radicle Funding, which is our upcoming feature set that we'll be launching quite soon.
Amazing. So what tech are you excited about that's upcoming, that you think will be most helpful for public goods and coordination?
Yeah, I mean, the neat thing about this space is how it's accelerating all the time. Because we've got composability in the ecosystem, we're starting to see that basically the speed is exponentially increasing, and the example that I think of this is that if I go into a Gitcoin hackathon or go to ETH Denver, there is a group of 3 hackers that are working on something that would have taken a bank $100 million and thousands of people to do 10 years ago, and it's because we have all these money Legos that we're able to compose together and build new things. And one of the things that's really exciting about that is every few months there's a new primitive that is added to that stack, which exponentially increases what can be done there. And the most The most promising thing that I'm seeing right now is this concept of a DAO, which is just basically a smart contract that has tokens in it and maybe a brand that serves as a Schelling point for people that are mission aligned to work together. And so, our mission is to grow and sustain open source. We want to create a world in which software developers are quitting their corporate jobs and going to work for the open internet. And I'm starting to find dozens of other DAOs that are under that same mission. I would count Radicle to be a friend in that mission, ENS, Yearn, all of these other DAOs. And so there's this sort of inter-DAO space where people are working to create a better world using smart contracts in Ethereum as the coordination layer and the Schelling point. And it's the sum of all of those things that really gives me a lot of hope at a time in which our traditional institutions are not doing a good job of solving these contemporary coordination problems. I think Ethereum is a Schelling point for the hopeful, and DAOs are the most promising place where the action is happening for me right now.
I love that. Ethereum as a Schelling point for the hopeful. Feels very true. Is Gitcoin a DAO?
Yeah, so on May 25th, what we did was we released GTC, which stands for Grow the Community. And it's a token that is the governance token of the Gitcoin network and the launch of Gitcoin DAO, which is basically a decentralized autonomous organization that has the same mission as the Gitcoin company. And we've got a couple work streams that are working on decentralizing Gitcoin, making sure that we have more impact, and launching fun prototypey things like moonshot bots. So it's been really a joy to eat our own dog food. I think we're building coordination tools for DAOs, and becoming a DAO ourselves is part of that journey.
Cool. Full disclosure, I'm actually in the Gitcoin DAO and I'm a steward, but questions are easier if you're kind of disingenuous about it. Like, DAOs? Interesting.
Yeah,
so, okay.
Exactly.
So, Abby, is Radicle a DAO?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I could just hop in and piggyback on what Kevin was saying.
Please.
I mean, first, I don't know if anybody in the audience knows, but Kevin and I are the leaders of the Web3 Rebel Alliance, and we believe that Web3 and crypto is a new hope for open source software, because I think the most exciting thing right now that we're seeing in this thesis that I think a lot of people are coming to is that DAOs are the future of open source, and that crypto networks and these decentralized organizational primitives that we're all experimenting with are the scaffolding for creating self-sustaining open source communities and projects. And with these new plug and play financial tools, we're starting to see that we can maintain not only technical resilience, but economic and social resilience within this emergent open source space that we're all playing in. And that is so incredibly powerful and so important for stewarding, this next generation of the internet. And so with Radicle, our goal is to be that collaboration infrastructure for this new internet, but to do it on our own as well. So Radicle is a DAO. Our goal is for all Radicle project development to be funded via the Radicle Treasury, which is a community-owned and governed pool of capital that ultimately will fund Radicle in perpetuity. And we've seen this example of protocol treasuries funding open source development. This is kind of the new image. These DAOs and these protocol treasuries will replace the corporations that kind of maintain a hold and limit the ability for our current open source development to really flourish and thrive and find its own ground. And DAOs are instead putting control back into the hands of the developers, and these protocol treasuries will form the foundational infrastructure for the Web3 ecosystem. And that's like incredibly powerful. And we're already seeing that experimentation happening without it being intentional. And so I think that building tooling to keep that moving forward is kind of one of the most important things that we can do right now, not just for the Web3 ecosystem, but for open source as a whole.
Excellent. And on that note, are there any upcoming or technologies that you're excited for, or mechanisms that you're excited for that are coming up in the future, either from Radicle or outside of Radicle, for public goods or open source?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, for example, like Gnosis's recent launch of Zodiac, which is, anybody experimenting with like a decentralized stack for DAOs is super exciting, because I think it's tapping into the modularization, is that a word? You know what I mean? The modularization of the space, taking
Absolutely.
smaller tools and spinning them up and creating experiences that allow groups of people to do things easier together. And so I think that with Radicle Funding, we're going to be launching an MVP within the next couple of months, which will be doing exactly that, taking primitives that have different use cases in different domains and applying it to the developer and giving developers a way to do something really easy together. And I think the goal is to continue modularizing our own technology and dog fooding it ourselves with the governance of our treasury, with the development of our stack, to keep providing new and exciting use cases that DAOs can opt into and use to decentralize pieces of their stack and empower their communities in different ways with decentralized tooling.
Amazing. Yeah, and for those who don't know, the Gnosis Zodiac, right? It's a suite of tools that got added to Gnosis Safe that allows for all these additional things you can do in DAOs, like some of the Moloch structures, different cool mechanisms that you can add. Is that a fair summary, or is there anything else you'd like to add about Zodiac? Were you excited about it, or does that?
I think that taps into it. I think
Okay.
it's pretty cool. I think that the Gnosis team has, and the people leading the Zodiac launch have such a clear vision of what DAOs can be and are really tapping into that and driving it forward. And so I know Radicle is a partner in the Zodiac launch, and so we're excited to be working with them to start providing pieces of that stack, so we can start creating more, instead of a stack, kind of like a patchwork of these open source tools and protocols that mesh together to form like extremely hyper resilient infrastructure that DAOs can start again opting into and transitioning to, because inherently I think that our inherent like reliance on centralized infrastructure, not just for like the distribution of our code and for everything else, it's inherently unsustainable. And so we need to start that transition. And so I think that people who are working on understanding what the pieces are, where the pain points are, and then bringing together the solutions and delivering them in ways that are easy and simple to understand are extremely important, and what I'm very excited about.
Amazing. Okay, so we only have a minute left here. Kevin, I wanted to ask, you have a great saying about memes. I think it's like a minimum viable communication.
Yeah, I think can't remember all the things I've tweeted, but basically a great meme. There's that old Albert Einstein saying that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and I think that sufficiently advanced mechanisms are indistinguishable from a meme. So when you're coordinating one day, you may not even know about all the tech that's underneath of it.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great thing to close on. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Abby.
Thanks so much, Matt. This has been great.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Abby. Come to New York next time.
Okay, I will soon, I promise.